If you're noticing more hair in the drain lately, or if your part looks wider than it used to, or if your ponytail feels thinner, or your scalp's peeking through in ways that it never did before, and people keep saying it's just stress, let's pause that. Because you're not crazy, you're not vain, and you're definitely not imagining it. This episode, we're going to decode what your hair is actually trying to tell you. Hey everybody, welcome back to the Root Cause RX podcast. I'm Dr. Nate Fulton, and today we're diving into something that I see in my practice almost weekly. But it's often dismissed in conventional settings until it starts affecting your confidence, your identity, or your sense of control. Hair loss. And look, I get it. On paper, it might not seem like a big deal, but for many people, hair loss does not feel small. It feels personal, and sometimes it's devastating. Because hair is more than just protein strands coming out of your scalp. It's often tied to how you see yourself, your femininity, your youth, your vitality, your self-expression. So when it starts thinning or shedding or falling out in handfuls, it can trigger fear, shame, and a deep sense that something's wrong. And too often, when someone finally works up the courage to ask for help, they get dismissed. It's probably just stress. It's just postpartum. It's normal at your age. It's just your hormones. Here, take some biotin. Why don't you come back in a few months if it gets worse? But here's what I want you to hear loud and clear. Hair loss is never random. It is your body waving a flag saying, hey, I'm not getting what I need. And when you know how to read that signal, instead of fighting your body, you can start supporting it. So in this episode, I'm walking you through the most common root causes that I see behind hair loss, the exact labs I run, and what I'm actually looking for on them. How things like stress, hormones, blood sugar, and undereating all play a role, and what to do if you're in it right now and feeling discouraged. Because this isn't just about vanity, it's about vitality. It's about learning how to listen to your body again and giving it what it needs to heal. Let's get into it. So let's start with a mindset shift that I give every patient who brings this up. Hair loss is not the problem, it's the signal. It's not silly to care, it's not shallow to be frustrated, and it's not just in your head. But if all you do is chase the symptom with topical serums or fancy shampoos or biotin gummies, you're missing the deeper conversation your body's trying to have with you. And here's what I mean by that. Hair is biologically expensive tissue. Your body only grows it when there's enough energy, nutrient availability, and hormonal balance to spare. And if your system's under stress, whether that's metabolically, emotionally, or immunologically, your body diverts resources away from non-essential functions like hair growth. Not because it's broken, but because it's smart. Your body's job isn't to look good on Instagram, it's to survive. So when there's inflammation or nutrient gaps or blood sugar swings or your nervous system is stuck in overdrive, your body goes, hey, we've got fires to put out. Let's pause anything non-essential. And one of the first things to go, it's your hair. So what do? We don't treat hair as the enemy. We treat it as a clue. We don't slap a band-aid on the symptom. We follow the signal. And we start asking better questions like, why doesn't my body feel safe enough to grow hair right now? And that's where real healing begins. Now, let's dig into what I actually see in practice because hair loss isn't random and it's rarely just one thing. More often than not, it's a stack of imbalances or a pattern, a perfect storm of metabolic, hormonal, and nutritional stress. Let's walk through the big 6 that I see. The first one, thyroid dysfunction. This is one of the first places that I look because your thyroid regulates metabolism everywhere, including in the hair follicle. Low thyroid function, even if it's subclinical, can slow down hair growth and increase shedding. And here's where it gets missed. Most conventional docs only test TSH, but TSH alone doesn't tell the whole story. Someone could have a TSH of 3.8, technically normal, but their free T3 might be rock bottom. Free T3 is the active thyroid hormone. It's the one that your cells, including your hair follicles, actually use. And if reverse T3 is high, that also clogs the signal even more. That's why my thyroid panels usually include TSH, free T3, free T4, reverse T3, and TPO antibodies, especially if there's a family history of thyroid issues. I had a patient whose hair was falling out in clumps, and her TSH, it was normal, but her free T3 was barely registering. We supported conversion, we reduced inflammation, and we worked on her stress and iron, and her shedding slowed down within weeks. Speaking of iron, that's my second one, low iron or ferritin. You physically cannot build hair without iron. And ferritin, which is your iron storage protein, is your follicle's fuel tank. And low ferritin is wildly underdiagnosed in women. Here's what most people aren't told. A ferritin under 50, hair growth slows. A ferritin under 30, hair can literally stop growing. This is especially common in women postpartum, after heavy periods, after an illness, or even anybody on restrictive diets. That's why I usually run a ferritin, a serum iron, and a total iron binding capacity, as well as iron saturation. And pro tip here, iron doesn't work alone. It needs B12, it needs copper, and vitamin C to be properly absorbed. Number 3, protein and amino acid deficiency. Hair is made of keratin, which is a protein. If you're under-eating protein or not digesting it well, you're not giving your body the raw materials that it needs to build anything, let alone hair. Clues that your protein might be too low: brittle nails, muscle loss or weakness, poor wound healing, fatigue, feeling soft or inflamed despite weight training. That's why I usually check things like total protein, urea nitrogen, albumin. Sometimes we look at amino acid profiles if we're being really thorough. And remember, nutrients like zinc, biotin, and B6, they all depend on adequate protein to be absorbed and delivered. Number 4, blood sugar swings and cortisol chaos. Here's a sneaky one, but it's huge. If your blood sugar is up and down all day, or if you're skipping meals or living on caffeine, crashing at 3 p.m. and wired at night, your cortisol is going to be dysregulated. And high cortisol, it shrinks hair follicles, it shortens that growth phase, which leads to more shedding and less regrowth. That's why I run things like a fasting glucose, fasting insulin, HbA1c, an AM cortisol or 4-point adrenal testing, and also a DHEAS. Hair doesn't grow when you're in fight or flight. It grows when your system feels calm and fed, and that starts with blood sugar. Number 5, hormone shifts. All right, this one deserves a little more time because hormone-related hair loss is one of the most misunderstood patterns that I see. And it doesn't show up the same way for everyone. Hair is incredibly sensitive to hormone changes, not just deficiencies. And that's why hair loss so often shows up during transitions, not steady states. I see this all the time in postpartum women coming off birth control, women in perimenopause, women with PCOS, or even anyone with after rapid weight loss, illness, or chronic stress. Let's break down what's actually happening. Estrogen. You can think of that like your growth phase protector. Estrogen helps keep hair in the anagen phase, which is the active growth phase. That's why during pregnancy, when estrogen is really high, a lot of people notice thicker hair, less shedding, more volume. But when estrogen drops, postpartum, post-pill, or during perimenopause, all of that hair that was held in growth finally shifts into that shedding phase. That's when people say, my hair just started falling out all at once. Low estrogen related hair loss often looks like overall thinning, not just patchy hair loss, dry, brittle strands, loss of volume or shine, and more visible scalp at the crown. And here's an important nuance. Sometimes estrogen isn't low on labs, but it is low relative to stress, inflammation, or blood sugar instability. And in those cases, your hair still feels the impact. I usually look at estradiol ideally in the context of the cycle, like early cycle we'll test just to get your baseline estrogen levels, and then we'll test mid-luteal around days 19 through 21, especially if someone is cycling. Then we have androgens, your testosterone and DHT. On the flip side, androgens, especially DHT, can shrink hair follicles over time. This type of hair loss tends to show up as thinning at the temples, a widening part, thinning at the crown, sometimes increased oiliness or acne, and this is incredibly common in women with PCOS, women who are having post-pill rebound, women in perimenopause, and high stress states where SHBG is low. And here's the key thing people don't get told. You don't need high testosterone to have androgen-driven hair loss. You just need higher free testosterone, low SHBG, or even a higher sensitivity to DHT. That's why I look at total testosterone, free testosterone, SHBG, and sometimes DHT if available. I've seen people with normal testosterone levels lose hair because the balance was off, not because testosterone itself was the enemy. All right, progesterone. This is the quiet stabilizer. Progesterone doesn't usually cause hair loss directly, but it does matter more than people think. Progesterone, it helps calm inflammation, it supports sleep, it helps balance estrogen, and it also signals ovulation and metabolic safety. So low progesterone, it often tells me ovulation isn't consistent, or your stress is high, or blood sugar is unstable, or perimenopause is beginning. And when progesterone is low, the whole system feels less stable, which absolutely affects your hair. I typically check progesterone mid-luteal, usually around days 19 through 21. That is if you have a normal 28-day cycle. A note on birth control and rebound hair loss here, because this one it comes up a lot. Hormonal birth control, it suppresses ovulation and it alters hormone signaling. So when someone comes off the pill, the body has to relearn how to regulate estrogen, progesterone, and androgens on its own. And during that recalibration period, which can last months, hair loss is really common. Not because the body is failing, but because it's adjusting. And that's why post-pill hair loss, it's not something to panic about, but it is something to support intentionally. So what do we actually do about hormone-related hair loss? Because this is important. We don't jump straight to hormone replacement. We start by supporting the terrain. We look to stabilize blood sugar. We make sure you're getting adequate protein and fats. We look at iron and nutrient repletion. We lower inflammation. We look at reducing your stress load. We support ovulation if that's appropriate. And once the system feels safer and more stable, hormone signaling often improves on its own, and then hair follows. You got to think, hormones are messengers, and when we fix the message environment, the signal is going to get clearer. Number 6, inflammation and autoimmunity. Chronic inflammation, it blocks nutrients, it scrambles hormone signaling, and if it crosses into autoimmunity, your immune system might literally start attacking your own hair follicles. I've seen this with Hashimoto's, lupus, psoriasis, mold illness, chronic gut dysbiosis, and histamine overload. That's why I often check CRP, ESR, ANA, TPO, and thyroglobulin antibodies. We might do a GI map if appropriate, and mycotoxin or histamine panels if the history warrants, right? If your immune system is stuck in fight mode, your hair can absolutely get caught in that crossfire. So let's zoom way out for a minute, because even if your labs look fine and even if your hormones are mostly okay, if your body doesn't feel fed consistently and adequately, it's not gonna grow hair. Simple as that. You'd be shocked how many people come to me with fatigue, hormone issues, and hair loss, and they're eating 1,200 calories a day, mostly carbs with barely any protein. Not because they're doing anything wrong, but because they've been conditioned to fear food, or they also skip breakfast and they're usually running on caffeine. So here's my question to you. Are you eating like someone who's trying to survive or someone who's trying to rebuild? Because there's a big difference there. Hair requires fuel, safety, and signal stability. So if you're under eating, if you're going 6 hours without food, your body's not going to say, cool, let's build hair. It's going to say, let's conserve, let's pause growth, let's survive. Your body isn't punishing you, it's protecting you. So you might be saying, cool, Nate, I get all that. How do I start rebuilding? Here's what I recommend. Eat within 60 to 90 minutes of waking. We want protein and fat, not just coffee. Don't go more than 4 to 5 hours between meals. Every blood sugar crash spikes cortisol, and that can shut down hair growth. Also, focus on 25 to 30 grams of protein per meal. Things like eggs, meat, collagen, lentils, whatever works for your lifestyle, but track it and make sure you're hitting 25 to 30 grams. Don't fear carbs. Pair them with protein. Carbs help shuttle nutrients into your cells, but they need balance. And last, flip the script. Front load your fuel. We want a big breakfast, a solid lunch, and a lighter dinner. That is how your metabolism likes it. So let's shift gears for a few minutes and hit some of the most common questions that I get about hair loss, whether it's in my Instagram DMs, with patients, or even on my intake forms. Because sometimes it's not about adding more info, it's about clarifying what you're already wondering. Number one, first question, how long does it actually take for hair to grow back? And this is such a good question, and I wish I had a magic number. But here's the best real answer. Your hair works in cycles. There's a growth phase, which is called the anagen phase. There's a rest phase called the telogen phase. And then there's a shedding phase called the exogen phase. When your body's under stress or lacking nutrients, more hairs shift into that shedding phase. But when you start supporting root causes, whether that's your thyroid, iron, inflammation, or food intake, it can take 2 to 4 months to even begin shifting that cycle back more towards that growth phase. Most of my patients, they start seeing visible improvements somewhere between 3 to 6 months. But internal markers like energy, sleep, and mood, those usually start getting better well before the hair does. So don't panic if you're doing everything right and your hair isn't changing yet. Your body's healing, and hair is one of the last places that shows it. Next question, should I take collagen or biotin? My answer is you can, but neither are magic bullets. Biotin only helps if you're deficient, and most people aren't. It's also water soluble, so if you're taking mega doses and your levels are already adequate, you're just making expensive pee. Collagen, that can be helpful, especially when it's paired with vitamin C, since that does support collagen synthesis. But even collagen won't help if your body is underfed, inflamed, or depleted in iron or thyroid hormones. So my answer, they're tools, but they're not root solutions. I care more about why your hair is falling out than what you can throw at it. All right, next question. What's the difference between breakage and shedding? This is an awesome question, and it's really helpful to know. Shedding equals the hair falling out from the root. You'll usually see a little white bulb on the end, while breakage is the hair shaft snapping mid-strand. This is often due to external stress, whether that's heat, bleaching your hair, or other types of damage to the hair itself. But it can also happen if you're nutrient depleted, especially if you're low protein or low zinc. So if your ponytail feels thinner or you see a ton of strands with little white bulbs after brushing or showering, that's likely shedding, and that means that it's likely internal, not just about your hair care routine. All right, next question. Can hair loss be reversed if it's been going on for years. In most cases, yes, but not always to 100% of what it was. The key here is why it's been happening and how early you catch it. If you've had unaddressed thyroid issues or iron deficiency or PCOS or post-pill rebound for years without support, your follicles may have miniaturized or gone dormant. But in my experience, when we stabilize those underlying patterns and we stay consistent, most people see noticeable regrowth within a few months. So even if it's been years, you're not completely out of options, but it is time to go deeper than those surface level treatments. All right, last question. What about postpartum hair loss? Is that normal? Postpartum hair loss is common, but it doesn't mean that it's inevitable or that you're helpless. Here's what happens. During pregnancy, your high estrogen levels keep your hair in the growth phase. So once those hormones drop postpartum, that hair finally enters the shedding phase and you see a catch-up loss, right? So for some people, that balances out within a few months. But for others, especially if they're breastfeeding or sleeping poorly or under eating and inflamed, it can drag on. So yes, it is normal to shed, but excessive prolonged hair loss is often a sign that your body needs more support, not just a brush off. All right, if you're listening to this and you're in the thick of it, or if you're watching your hair shed and wondering if it'll ever stop, or if you feel dismissed, gaslit, or discouraged, take a breath. You're not broken, you're not vain, and you're not alone. Hair loss is not your body giving up on you. It's your body protecting you. It's saying, I don't have the capacity for growth right now. I need help. So here's what I'd tell you if you were sitting directly across from me. 1, you're not crazy. You're just depleted. And that changes how we treat it. Number 2, be curious, not frantic. This is a signal. It's not a sentence. Number 3, start with data, not guesswork. Get the right labs. The lab list can be found in the checklist located in the show notes. Number 4, build safety first. Fuel, rest, blood sugar, digestion, nervous system. Those are the roots. And number 5, be patient. Hair works in cycles. It may take 3 to 6 months for the changes to begin to show up, but your body is already shifting under the surface. All right, let's land this. If you've been dealing with hair loss and no one's taken it seriously, I see you. If you've been told it's just hormones or just stress, I hear you. And if you've been trying to fix it with surface level stuff and feeling defeated, I've got you. Your body is not failing you, it's asking for support. And when you stop and start to listen, when you begin replenishing, nourishing, investigating, that's when your body gets to feel safe enough to grow again. Hair loss might be what brought you here, but the healing that happens underneath, that's the real win. DM me the word hair on Instagram and I'll send you the hair restoration guide that I use in practice. The exact labs I run to decode what's really going on. Or look in the show notes. A link will be there for the guide as well. You don't have to guess. You don't have to settle. You don't have to just live with it. Your body is speaking. Let's help you understand what it's saying. And until next time, be kind to your body, be gentle with your story, and keep showing up, even if it's messy. You're rebuilding, and that's worth honoring. Before you head out, thank you so much for spending this time with me. If you're learning from this podcast or it's helping you understand your body a little better, there are a couple really simple, zero-cost ways you can support the show, and they honestly make a huge difference. First, if you're watching on YouTube, make sure you subscribe to the channel. That's one of the best ways to help this podcast grow and reach more people who need this information. If you're listening on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, go ahead and hit the follow button so you don't miss future episodes. And on both platforms, you can leave up to a 5-star review, which helps more than you know. You can also leave comments now on both Spotify and Apple, which is pretty cool. So if you have questions for me or topics you'd love for me to cover in future episodes, drop those there. And if you really want to make sure that I actually see your questions, the best place to leave them is in the YouTube comments. I love reading them, I take time to go through them, and I do my best to respond personally. Thanks again for being here, for listening, and for being part of this community. I really appreciate you, and I'll see you in the next episode.